Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I just the LCS is just really, I think, quite disappointing right now. I guess there's something nice a little bit about EG bouncing back, because they had been struggling, including losing to Dignitas the week before.
The thing with theirs as well is like it's the same as the beginning of the split. Like just the roster made no sense how dodgy they were looking, mate. That roster, it even still just looks like it should be the obvious one contender with FlyQuest to be the top team in the league. Just seems obvious, right? It's a quality roster of players. It's good.
Yeah, and swapping Impact for Someday is not the biggest stylistic
change
in the universe. Yeah. Like it feels like I do think Impact is better, but I mean, we got to see that matchup this past week with Someday playing the Stride Breaker Garen, which was pretty hilarious, right? But at the same time, I think my issue with FlyQuest is that Vikla, they tend to give up a lot of advantages in the early game and then have to claw their way back in through superior team fighting and mid to late game macro. But they shouldn't be falling behind this early. And certainly Vikla could be doing better and dying less in some of these laning phases, because a lot of the times when FlyQuest has been on the ropes, it's because their mid lane falls apart and they're trying to have to make up for it later. And Vikla has been able to do that, but definitely didn't happen in the game that they played against EG. And I don't know. I think FlyQuest becomes, even though I think they are clearly the best team in the league and will win the league overall, I don't understand why they're having such struggles in some of these early game positions that they find themselves in.
It's a joke how far ahead they are, though. Like what's funny is if this was actually a stacked LCS, I think C9 could have put themselves in real trouble with this like mid lane gamble and so on. They haven't missed a fucking beat, because the joke is they weren't going to beat FlyQuest anyway, so they beat everyone else, even with the fucking other mid lane. It doesn't matter, like you can do whatever you want, because the Cloud9 roster just fundamentally has a couple of players who are going to carry no matter what in Blabber and fucking Berserker. So as long as those players are there, you can just do whatever you want. Like none of the other teams are actually good enough. Like the parity is at least going to be decent for playoffs, but it's terrible for the championship. Like you say, basically it's either FlyQuest wins easily or they just drop the ball. That's it. There's no like this team should beat them. Like even in a perfect world, EG could maybe give them a good series, but I don't think they beat them. There's no reason they should.
Yeah, and I think Cloud9 is powering up. Like the more we see the shift over to MNS, like I'm enjoying this more than DPlus, because I think the ceiling is higher. And
do you actually think that theory is true, by the way, that maybe like it's the other way around? Like maybe they always wanted to field the MNS guy, but they had some concerns, maybe he's toxic or maybe he has to like earn his
I have
key.
no idea. I haven't heard anything about that.
Because when you do look at the two of them, like mate, the eye test on him does check out way better than the DPlus guy. Come on. He just looks way better, doesn't he?
The only information I have is what's been talked about publicly.
No, so I'm just saying I
don't really have any behind the scenes information. I haven't really dug into that one at all. But I do think that outside of his first game, MNS has looked good, seems to have a better stylistic synergy, particularly with Blabber. And Fudge has returned to top lane in a much better form this year. So Cloud9 definitely on the radar for contesting for the title here. I think that that C9 and FlyQuest are really just a cut above right now. And the meta does seem like it favors C9 overall. Like they are able to play up tempo. They are able to play aggressively. Berserker and Sven are players that do want to kind of dominate that lane and push forward and try and make plays. So I do like what we're seeing from C9, and barring some sort of major meta shift that could occur, they're looking all right. They're looking all right. I'm not sure how much there is to say about the rest of LCS, frankly.
I mean, the obvious one I would say is just this. Since he's been memed on and he's been the victim of narrative so many years in his career, I would just say congrats to Inero, the GM of Golden Guardians, who was obviously the coach for many, many, many years, and finally got the keys to the car. And people criticized him, oh, he's just hiring all people with like his friends or from the Ost region that he knows, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, not only did Golden Guardians have many lineups under his tenure that were way better than they should have been. Spoiler, the fucking core of the 100 Thieves team came from his Golden Guardians. issues. But look how he's rejigged the team now. This looks actually really good. Like some of these players, like I thought the River guy looked all right on Dig, but then wasn't quite as good as he should have been. Some of these other players, like I thought Licorice was washed, quite frankly. I would have said, get rid of him, get a rookie in there, you know. You look at the rest of the team, imagine telling someone the team with Sticks here is going to be ahead of fucking Bjergsen and Doublelift, like convincingly ahead, by the way. Like, mate, this lineup's actually no joke, like way more than the sum of their parts. It's actually some not bad players, but it just comes together way better than you'd think.
I would argue that in Licorice's case, if they replaced him with one of many other players, that perhaps this would be an even better team and might be, competing.
No, but I thought he would be in like, I was expecting him to be in like the 9th place team, like old Golden Guardians, exactly.
River was good last year. I think what makes Golden Guardians good is that they have been able to scout underappreciated talent very effectively. And they've also been able to get some players that may have been on downswings in their career through no fault of their own, like Gory. Because when Gory was on Nongshim Red Force, he was kind of a hyped, like up-and-coming mid-lane player. And then he got signed and went over to FunPlus Phoenix in China and then PSG Talon towards the end of last year. And so he kind of got lost, even though he was really, really hyped at some point in time. So I imagine Golden Guardians got a pretty good deal on Gory and was like, well, he's still young. I think he's like in his early 20s. Why don't we just try and see if this guy works, if we can get value? Because we've seen that he did at least appear to have a high ceiling at a certain point in time in the past. And we have another Korean player in River to kind of match him up with. And it turns out he might have just been in a bad situation or stuck on PSG Talon for a bit.
Also been on some amazing orgs. Like if people don't know, he was on T1, EDG, and FPX orgs. So you can imagine this guy must have had some crazy experiences, a very interesting coaching background. Like actually, if you're going to test someone out in a smaller region, this is how you do it. I think this approach where you pick up the Gories, the Malrangs of the world, like these are the sorts of players to gamble in the West, in my opinion. It's pretty good pickup.
Yeah. And I think also it's hard sometimes to evaluate Korean players when they go to China because not everybody takes well to that environment. And at least for Koreans, most of them have an easier time being in LA than they do in China because it's culturally more similar. And there's just a lot of Koreans in Los Angeles. There's a lot of, Korean restaurants, food, culture. So it's less of a culture shock, I think, than being in certain parts of China. And I think he was also in China during like the peak of the COVID era. You know what I mean? And so the lockdowns, I think, were probably pretty harsh on the players who were there. So point is that you can't necessarily judge a dip in performance because it could have been environmentally related. And Gory has turned out to be an excellent pickup for Golden Guardians, and River and Gory, as well as Stixay, kind of returning to form, have been really hallmarks of this team. And as you say, I think Anero is doing a very good job. And I think Danon also did a good job in terms of assembling like quality rosters before when they basically maxed the value of the dollar that they were getting a lot of the time.
They were working with very small budgets in case people don't know.
Yeah, so they've done a lot with a little and deserve to be lauded for that. Like I do wish that we had a backup to Licorice that might be able to be used here, but it looks like a good team.
Yeah, but here's the other angle on the Licorice one is this, Monty, right? If you're Golden Guardians at the moment, since you have all these different player changes, you're also fielding Licorice because he's your only name value player for NA fans, like at least he still has positive associations. Everyone likes him. They passed on Cloud9. I also think that's initially why they tried this lineup. So maybe in the future split, they do bring someone else in because if you could get the right rookie, it would obviously be the upgrade, wouldn't it? Like this team could get quite dangerous if they had a carry top laner.
I mean, I even think if they obviously, like, I'm a fan of Revenge, but I think that even Revenge on this team would be a pretty significant upgrade over Licorice because they don't need a top laner who's going to be the big carry. Like they're winning based off of their mid and jungle synergy right now and enabling River and Gory. So I think if you have a stable top laner, that this makes a lot of sense.
We're just looking for someone who's going to play like fucking Scion, all the classics.
Yeah,
just classic big side.
Yeah, you can get a bunch of you can get players like this.
Yeah, for sure.
That on a budget, I think that isn't super high. But yeah. I think Golden Guardians has been a very welcome surprise in the LCS, and it looks like, you know, at least between FlyQuest and Golden Guardians, we may end up with a more surprising final with new teams, which I also think the LCS needs. I have a sneaking suspicion that Cloud9 is just going to sweep through and take it again randomly, but we'll see. We will see.
Cloud9's going to win the whole league.
It's possible, man. I think with the way they look right now and the fact that the meta seems to be trending in their direction and the MNS switch, if they can abuse FlyQuest weak early game and Vikla, I think it's definitely possible that they can win.
I mean, it's possible, but that's also, in my opinion, though, why this playoffs is going to be mega interesting. Because bearing in mind, Cloud9, like, look, the rest of the roster is really experienced, but the M&S guy knows fuck all about LCS playoffs. Then you go and look, like, Evil Geniuses obviously has a pretty good roster, but just hasn't fully come to peak power yet. FlyQuest has all those players who just never played in LCS before. Like, who knows how the playoffs is going to go, mate? I feel like it's a complete crapshoot at the moment. Like, and also remember, because of the way the LCS works with all those spots, the playoffs is like a mini season of its own, in it. So, like, you almost don't even carry that much from this regular split into the playoffs. Like, once playoffs begins, it's a whole new meta, a whole new fucking meta game of like what people are picking. So, I think it's going to be really exciting, put it that way. Really exciting.
And also, I would say that FlyQuest also might be just fucking around. Like, they're already qualified for playoffs. They've already locked a playoff position. And, you know, for the most part, because of the way that the format operates within LCS and the top 6 teams are going to be going to the spring playoffs, you only have to get top 4 to guarantee yourself double elimination. So the stakes are pretty low right now for FlyQuest, and they may not be, you know, practicing as hard or playing as hard as they could be. It'd be very hard to knock them out of the top 4, considering they are 11-2 currently. And the remaining schedule is Team Liquid, Immortals, C9, GG, and TSM. They basically can win a couple of those games and guarantee themselves top 4.
Right, what we're pivoting to now.
I would like to take a quick break, and then we can talk about LPL and LCK. That would be wonderful. All right, guys, sorry about that quick break, but we're back now, and we've got to talk once more about our delightful sponsor, FreezePipe. First off, thank you very much to FreezePipe for sponsoring us. We really appreciate it. And as you guys know, one of the best ways to support us is to support our sponsors. So if you're looking for a new piece of glass to assist you in your celebration of 420, which is coming up in about a month's time, now's a nice chance to upgrade what you've got already. Or if you're first time, an enjoyable experience, of course, with FreezePipe. They have bongs, dab rigs, bubblers, pipes. They've got it all over there. And each piece does contain a glycerin chamber that you can remove very conveniently, so you don't have to put the whole thing in your freezer. Take that glycerin chamber, perfectly safe, by the way. Glycerin used in a variety of foods. It's just there so it can actually freeze faster. Throw it in your freezer for an hour, and then it will cool the smoke and make you have a much more enjoyable smoking experience, guys. So thank you very much to the FreezePipe. You can head on over to www.thefreezepipe.com and use the promo code LFN for 10% off your order. So do not forget to use that promo code LFN. It's easy. It stands for Last Free Nation. You know that, guys. So thank you very much to FreezePipe for their sponsorship. Very much.
Oh, is that where you just went now? You just went to pop the glycerin chamber in the freezer so that by the time this show's ended in a mere hour, then you'll be able to smoke and get a cooler smoking experience, right? Okay, that's cool. Good. Glad to know.
Usually I save that for LCS days, Thorin, because that's the way that it actually makes LCS fun to watch. So if you guys have been struggling watching LCS, get yourself a FreezePipe. That's my advice. That's my advice right there.
I mean, here's the cool thing. Because it only takes 1 hour to cool the glycerin chamber down. That means if you were to go and watch from the beginning to the end, the classic TSM versus Evil Geniuses series in summer playoffs last year, which actually was one of the series where Danny already wanted to quit because it lasted 8 hours. If you were to put the FreezePipe chamber in at the beginning of the match, after game 1 or so, you could take it out. Then you could even do it 2 more times for your entire 8 or 9 hour smoking session. So there you go. Obviously, be responsible.
Yeah, I did. You know, when it was talked about with Danny as it being, you know, the TSM versus EG best of 5 is the thing that kind of pushed him over the edge because
Don't
he was
blame him for his 8
already.
hours, mate.
It was 8 hours. That was also, guys, the day that I tweeted, because as soon as the pauses began, remember, I started watching game 1. The pauses began. I was like, I can't deal with this. I'll watch this later. I literally went to the butcher, got ribs, smoked pork ribs for 5 hours, ate them, and then the series wasn't over yet. That's how long that series took. I can't. It must be just an absolute nightmare to play these series as a player, with these insane delays, because at least we can just give up on the series and be like, okay, I'm going to watch the VODs because it's going to compress the time frame down to like 3 hours instead. Feel sorry for the players. Feel sorry for the players.
So the beauty is you're eating smoked ribs, watching Bjergsen get smoked, and then after that you smoked weight. So the trifecta, you got all of them. You did it all. You got all the smoke,
the complete experience. The complete experience.
Yes, exactly. I think we should rename our show to that. All the smoke. We're going to call it. Monty and Thorin present All the Smoke, patented TM. I don't think there's anyone else conflict of the interest in the show. No.
I think it's totally fine. Okay.
Should we do LCK then? Because I've got another angle on this. I've come with some homework as well. I say homework. Okay. I read Reddit and found some interesting details for you. I don't know if you saw this thread, because obviously one of the really weird things about this LCK split, if you're a fan who hasn't been following LCK, is obviously the big hype off-season move for Damwon was bringing in Deft, who's just won Worlds. And you look at the team, like, spoiler, at the point in Deft's career he's at now, he was never going to be the Uzi super resource carry anyway. So if anything, you even think that's actually a great upgrade, isn't it? Like, Doktiam was a little bit underwhelming or just average. You bring in Deft, he just has to basically be a better Doktiam, right? Well, even though in the team, actual Damwon DPlus now hasn't done very well this split, they've only sort of got it back together now by scooping all the wins off the little shitter teams that they're supposed to be. So the record looks fine, but they are a bit sus for that record. But the weirdest thing of all is, it's not Deft who's at all playing badly, guys. Like, I actually saw there was a Reddit thread. He's number 1 in every single category, Monty. He's number 1 in, like, KDA, CS per minute. This is like a week ago or 3 days ago. He's number 1 in KDA, CS per minute, damage per minute, kill share, gold share, least deaths. He is second in gold per minute and only behind Gumayushi. Like, mate, what's going on in that sense? Because that means essentially individually, Deft's actually having a pearl of a split. It just seems it doesn't interface with the rest of the team somehow. What's the issue?
So yeah, I think first off, I do think DPlus has found their groove again. After we talked about Showmaker a couple weeks ago, struggling and openly saying basically that he's burnt out, and it did appear that he was in fact burnt out. I don't know if just saying it publicly has remotivated him or there are other factors, but he looks a lot better. So to the Deft point, if we rewind to the start of the split, a lot of DPlus's wins were carried by Deft and Kellen playing Lucian and Nami, and they're now 8-0 this split in games where they get Lucian Nami. Now, it was given to them a lot more at the start of the split, so that powered up some of their early victories, and people started eventually taking it away from them. So that also, because they were playing so heavily through that bot side, really did inflate a lot of the stats that we associate with Deft. Not to say he hasn't been good, guys, because he's been great. And then what happened was later on, their troubles a lot of the time weren't that they were playing early games badly. In fact, oftentimes they would be ahead or doing just fine. And then we'd get to a stage in the game where Showmaker would be split pushing and he would just die. And then the other team would get Baron and then they would lose the game very suddenly. So there were a lot of kind of careless macro mistakes that DPlus was making, or Kana would be having a bad game. And Kana, I think, has taken a lot longer than most people would have anticipated for a veteran player to integrate into this roster, but he looks a lot better recently. But honestly, a lot of this has just been a slight meta shift, because Canyon being able to play Lee Sin, Nidalee, Elise, Viego now again, these early game ganking junglers has really empowered DPlus in many ways. Showmaker not making the same mistakes anymore, as well as Showmaker being able to show off the depth of his champion pool and playing a few less orthodox picks, or I suppose we should say reviving them from last year. Bringing the Lissandra back, the classic LeBlanc counter was a great move. It was an excellent Lissandra composition that they played in the second game versus Hanwha Life. So I think all of these factors are powering up this team. Their drafts have also gotten better. I mean, they allowed Hanwha Life in game 1 of their series to have the Caitlyn, and their answer was when they saw that the Karma was banned, they banned the Lux, which makes it safe for Def to play Jinx, which is certainly a fringe meta AD carry pick, without threat. And we didn't really know that Kellen was going to be playing Kalista. Like, that's not that hasn't been Kellen's style to play a lot of these supportive AD carries. He's played it like only one other game on Kalista so far this split, and the emphasis really has been on enchanters for Kellen overall. So by bringing that in, you did throw a little curveball that you wouldn't necessarily expect DPlus to use. And then, Showmaker's been able to play like Lissandra and Annie mid lanes, where he can provide a lot more of the support and crowd control and open up things for the rest of the squad. So I think DPlus looks really good right now. I think arguably they're the second best team in Korea as it stands after this week.
I mean, obviously Gen G's fallen a little bit, sure. I mean, the other thing I would say, this is what I want to bring it back to, though, is like, dude, unironically, we're right now the moment that you would take in the time machine and show the fan in 2013. You'd go, Deft and Faker, they're both really amazing 10 years from now, mate, for real.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're both having banger fucking rollback splits. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good sign for the game. Obviously, that they've been able to have this longevity. It makes it so you get such amazing storylines like we had in the World Finals last year, and you get such amazing storylines like we have, in the LCK.
Well, it would be cool if they play in the final this playoffs, wouldn't it?
Oh,
That'd be an awesome fucking matchup.
Oh, I'm sure that would be crazy. And, we're going to get T1 versus DPlus in the last week of the split as well. So that rematch, and the first T1 versus DPlus is still my favorite. It was still my favorite series that's been played this year.
Yes.
That happened in week 2. We're now just finishing week 7, and we've seen other good matchups, but the level of research that went into that game, they really did a good job of like scouting each other, trying to deny each other power picks. It was an insanely close best of 3, just very, very pleasurable to watch overall. And I mean, the Gen G T1 was also good, but not as good as DPlus versus T1. And so if DPlus can maintain this form and the depth of their champion pool, it looks like they found a way to really power through. Because the thing with DPlus is they are approaching the point where it's very difficult to ban them out. And like Kana's Renekton is undefeated. Their Lucian Nami is undefeated. Right. We have Canyon's Lee Sin. So there are all these picks that maybe aren't the power picks that you're seeing. Like usually the bans that we're seeing most commonly are things like Varus, right? Ash.
A lot of bot lane shit. A lot of bot lane stuff. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of bot lane shit. I mean, if you go back to KT versus Live Sandbox, we're now reaching games where there are eight 80 carry bans in a single game, which is just crazy,
it's
right?
Mad, isn't it?
But Sejuani, Annie, Caitlyn, Ash, these are all very high priority bans within Korea right now. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely working out, because you can also it's not like DPlus can't play Caitlyn. You know what I mean? Like they're still a good Caitlyn team. So they actually have a depth.
Come on.
Oh yeah. They have a depth that is really, really quite good right now, and that you like to see. So I'm now that Showmaker looks like he's a little bit back in form, I am much more high on DPlus than I was. In Canyon, a lot of his issues were overextending on like champions like Sejuani, whereas now that he can flex and play some of these early game junglers and all in more effectively, we're seeing him be a lot more potent on the map early, and the rest of the team is able to carry through into the late game.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.